So we're here this afternoon in Marina del Rey with Gelardi of Gypsy, and obviously Norbert here. And to establish you, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro to who you are,
Sure.
what Gypsy is?
Sure. Well, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gypsy, which is an advertising agency. We differ a little bit from the norm in that we are a global platform of about 3,500 creative specialists based all over the world, and we work with companies like Twitch and HBO Max, Netflix, Tinder, Intuit, and a range of others.
Amazing. And is this what you expected yourself to be doing when you were a 16-year-old man?
Honestly, I didn't really know that advertising was a job when I was 16. I obviously knew that ads existed and they were interrupting my TV viewing, but I never really understood it as an industry, and I certainly didn't understand that being a creative in advertising was a job, let alone a career. So I didn't expect it, and I kind of fell into it through the back door. But yeah, it can be fun. It has its moments. It's a job that, unlike a lot of other industries, is always evolving. The landscape with which we inhabit changes all the time, so we have to change with it. Part of the reason that we started Gypsy is because the way that advertising was done in the 50s is not really the way it's done now, but interestingly the agency model hasn't really changed with it. So this is our attempt at rewriting the rule book for the way advertising agencies function, and yeah, it's good. It's going well.
Where do you see your role in the intersection of innovation and creative within this agency?
Well, I think now they're sort of indistinguishable in that, in the same way as you can only write so many songs with the same three chords, like that's the way advertising has been for a very long time. You would do your TV and your print and your radio and out of home and a few other bits and pieces, but now the media landscape just keeps fragmenting, and because of that, you need to have all these different specialists to come on board, and a lot of those specialists are in the innovation space, and innovating the ways with which you can reach people is critical, because they get bored very quickly now. People's attention spans are limited, and I think you need to rethink your approach every time, especially now where everything is so throwaway. People are on such a short life cycle of the things that they are exposed to. So innovation is critical, because in the same way that it's an interesting way to reach someone, if you can reach them in a way that they've never seen before, then they're likely to talk about it. And if they talk about it, then that's something that really money can't buy, in a sense.
And so, on a kind of a day-to-day basis, is there a typical day, and what's that look like in your world?
It varies hugely. We work with big established brands, very storied brands that have been there and done everything. And for those brands, we might, have maybe a more, traditional approach to things, because that's what they're used to. But then with those guys, we're always trying to push the boundaries and get them to step out of their comfort zone. So, that's an interesting part of the day when it's those kind of brands. And then equally, we work with startups that, quite candidly, maybe don't understand marketing. And so for those guys, the job to do is almost to explain the fundamentals and then take them through it, and then explain how that applies to them as a company and the interesting ways that they can reach people. So it's really varied. You might have a day where it's back-to-back meetings and you're just doing the same old internal stuff, and then other days you're out on a shoot and you're creating something really cool, or you've come up with an idea and the whole team is completely jazzed about it, and you're just trying to figure out how the hell you're actually going to execute it, which is a lot of, I think, when you're at the forefront of innovation in communications, like a lot of it is that you have the idea, whether or not you can pull it off is like a big big question mark. So I think those are the best days when the team is visibly excited about something, and then the challenge of like how to actually crack the code is like on everyone's minds.
And what part of the technology innovation do you see being most impactful in the coming years, ranging from metaverse to void? Where do you see this going?
The metaverse, I mean, it's a loaded word, I think now, because we work with a lot of companies that are blockchain-based companies, and the metaverse is like this word that gets thrown around, and I think it's in the way that it's talked about, it's not, the technology is not necessarily there to back up the claims. But what was the question again?
What do you see the most impactful channel of technology with regards to the brand communications?
It's a good question. I do think in terms of comms, we live on social essentially, and social is not a new thing, but the way social functions, I think, changes all the time. People's viewing habits are changing all the time. So, I think we're still screen-based for the large part, and I think there's innovation within screen interaction. Like truly interactive entertainment is something that I think is just that people have scratched the surface of that, and I think that is really interesting. I think a few brands have done things where they've created interactive storytelling. I think the entertainment industry, we work with HBO and Netflix, and I think those companies are starting to look at like what is the future of interactive entertainment. Like you've got these worlds converging essentially. Gaming is all interactive, and that's molding into storytelling and TV and linear stories, and so I think that whole space is ripe for some really amazing immersive entertainment that is can also have commerce built into it.
We're exploring the attitude to audio. So in terms of kind of audio and radio listening throughout your life, what's been your attitude, and how's that affected your life?
I think it's changed over the years. I think when I was younger, radio was a big part of everyone's life. They would listen to the radio station to know what music to listen to, and I think a bit as you get a bit older, there's a bit more kind of opinion and talk radio maybe like crept into your life, and then now podcasts are obviously huge, and the podcast market is just ballooning, and I think even that's gone through quite a significant evolution from it was indies, and it was guys like going out on their own and creating podcasts, and now it's big business, big companies moving into the space. So I think even the way podcasts have evolved has changed people's listening habits. But I mean, music has always been a huge part of my life, along with most other people. And I do think that the way that we consume music has changed, not necessarily for the better. I think it's interesting that having every single song in the world at your disposal is not necessarily the best way to be, because I don't think you treat the music with the same reverence that maybe you did when you went out and bought an album, a CD or whatever it was, and you listen to every track. So I think the way that we've got this, like it's a great example of it's a microcosm of the world, right? We have everything that we could ever want, and it's instant gratification, and I think that's not necessarily helped the music industry. So I personally, I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and various things that I'm into. Usually recommendations, one-off stuff like that, but there's a certain number that I listen to regularly, and I find like it's the great source of sort of curated information, which you never got from radio.
Yeah.
You know, radio was just kind of in your face, shouty, but you would listen to it for the music, and the DJ and the ads were kind of a necessary evil. And now, you know, there's so much curation in the podcast space. You can find exactly what you're into, and there'll be someone waxing lyrical about that exact thing. So I think that's really cool. And yeah, you know, in terms of my listening habits now, it's a mixed bag, but yeah, it's mostly podcasts and Spotify and Pandora and all the rest of it.
And we're looking at kind of best practice, or kind of what advertising around the audio space moves you. Can you remember the first audio ads? Is there an audio ad or a radio station that sticks out from?
I mean, I used to listen to Capital FM back in the day, and I seem to remember there was a car phone warehouse ad that was like, I can't remember it now, but they were just on there all the time, and they weren't good, I don't think. I think a lot of radio ads are especially on those kind of radio stations, were very kind of shouty and in your face, and they would normalize the audio so that it was louder than everything else, as they do with TV ads. So yeah, there's nothing that sticks out in my mind that fondly about radio advertising, but I think there's again, when you blend sort of editorial with like advertorial audio, when podcasts start talking about products and stuff like that, where it's actually genuinely interesting, I think you're way more likely to listen to that, take it in, and have it affect your behavior than a shouty radio ad from the 90s.
So it's in terms of that kind of melange of you know, the ads and content, you know, can you think of any other ways that radio ads have changed over the last kind of 10-15 years?
You know, I don't listen to the radio now, so I don't know. I mean, I do listen to podcasts, and there are ads inserted in the podcast, and I think just because of the way that the podcast is delivered, the way the advertising is like has had to like shift to match that. You know, if you're listening to a long form podcast and it's some true crime thing and some shouty ad comes on, it just kills the vibe. I mean, it's just going to it's going to give you a negative feeling. I think also, in a way, a lot of podcasters do their own ads during the podcast, and they do it in their own style, and that lends itself to just the whole thing kind of feels more in keeping with like a real recommendation from the person that you've just been listening to and you trust them. And it's sort of like the old-fashioned way of TV advertising from the 50s, where they would like, you know, give you an ad as part of the show kind of thing. And I do think that is definitely better. I do think that sort of the packaged up like shouty 30-second or 15-second ad is maybe not the best way to reach people. I think if things feel in keeping with the content that you're listening to, if you can target through the content and the style and the genre and all of those things, you're much likely to get a positive reaction.
And then what's your view? Like, you know, obviously, like, you know, what we do is we allow people to then engage with those kind of ads in the same medium. Like, you know, we're using their voice. What do you think is the role of that kind of interactivity?
Again, you know, we live in a world of instant gratification, and we want everything to be, you know, instantly delivered. And if it doesn't come in 48 hours, it's some kind of outrage. And that's like such a new thing. It's like just in the last 5 years, suddenly, if you know, you go onto a website and order something and it doesn't come in the time that Amazon would deliver it, then you know, you're never going to them again. So I think having a platform whereby when you hear about something, you can essentially order it, or see something, you can essentially order it. It's like everyone's doing a million things at once, right? And having a mechanism by which there can be a moment of inspiration I'm getting older, right? And I have a terrible short-term memory. But I see things all the time, whether it be something, on Instagram or on TV, and I think about it, and I think about like ordering it, but honestly, like even going to my phone seems like it might be, too much of an inconvenience and break my flow of whatever it is I'm doing. So I put it in the back of my mind and I say, well, I'm going to look into that product later, or that sounds really cool. And then by and large, I never do. And it may pop into my mind at another point, but I've usually forgotten about it, or I've forgotten to buy it, or whatever. So I do think the mechanism by which, like, the moment inspiration strikes, you can essentially transact is always going to be good. And I think that's what digital advertising did when it was a one click to buy, and I think that's happened over the years, and this just seems like the obvious evolution of that.
In terms of awareness marketing and brand awareness, and based on your experience, what are the main drivers that actually achieve maximum brand awareness in a campaign?
Just general brand awareness? Mm-hmm. I think that's gone through a few evolutions just in recent years. I think if there's a difference between brand awareness and brand love and advocacy, and I think that's, you can be aware of a brand but not necessarily want to engage with them, because I think what used to just be like shout at people and they'll know your brand and then they'll remember to put that in your basket in the shopping mall or whatever it is now people understanding what brands stand for, or even this is a few years ago. I think people would really look for brands that shared their values and that kind of stuff. So brand values moved to the forefront of a lot of advertising, and that led to brands that exist that have an almost intangible brand love, like a Patagonia or something, where everyone's just like, well, I love them and they're expensive, but I'll buy them because they have all these, they're doing all these endeavors to essentially make the world a better place, and so I'll pay over the odds or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of brand stories that have been very well told, that lead to massive brand awareness and word of mouth. If you love a brand and you go out and you're wearing it, or you're consuming it or whatever it is, and you tell someone about it, like that recommendation from a friend is worth more than 1,000 TV ads. I do also think that people generally vibe well with clever ideas, and they vibe well with good storytelling, and it's not to speak ill of clients, because obviously they have their own things to worry about, but very often the creative integrity of a piece of work gets chipped away at through that process, and it's always frustrating as a creative person, because you can see that what we set out to produce would have been this incredibly impactful piece of comms, and then gradually there's input from various different parts of the client business, and essentially they break down those pieces that we're going to tug on the heartstrings, or make people think about the product in a different way, and essentially lessen the impact of that piece of communication. So there are brands that see that, and there are brands that don't. I also think if you talk a lot about yourself, as in your own product, generally that doesn't resonate as well as when you talk about the people who consume your product. It's a very basic rule, not followed by a lot of brands, but I think when people can see themselves as part of the audience of the product, and they can see themselves in it, and it's not just all about like talking about themselves, that also leads to brand love, brand awareness, all those things that essentially all brands want.
Consumer obsession. Right?
Consumer obsession and advocacy, and some brands have advocacy that is illogical. Yeah. And it's a very delicate thing, and it takes a deft touch to make that work, but the best agencies manage to do it, and the best brands see that value, and a lot of others don't, and they essentially have to pay more for their advertising. You know, they have to.
So you've got to do it again.
They've got to do it again and repeat it 100 times and get the message into your brain that way. So.
Yeah. This is absolute creative gold dust. So in terms of just wrapping this up with a kind of an audio theme, right? Is there any particular podcast or radio station that you would be listening to as we kind of leave this today? Or that you
podcast, you want to recommend?
Or maybe a recommendation, yeah.
Do you know the Blind Boy podcast?
Not yet.
You don't know the Blind Boy podcast?
No, this one.
Maria should know this. Like, it's this Irish guy who just talks about the most random things ever, but he's super smart. He does disparage advertisers a lot on his podcast, and he makes a point of every time the inserted ad break comes on of talking about how he's not beholden to the corporate swines who make advertising. But apart from that, his podcast is absolutely brilliant. It's like he does a lot of mental health stuff, but packaged up in a really palatable format. But also he does the best things is when he does these random hot takes on things that are so just interesting, and he's very erudite. And check it out, the Blind Boy podcast.
Fantastic. Noted. Amazing. Well, look, thanks so much for carving out some time for us this afternoon.
No worries.
See you again.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.